So this past weekend was a very significant weekend for WWE fans across the world, including myself. It was SummerSlam weekend, and SummerSlam is the second biggest premium live event of the year for the WWE, and it was the first ever two-night SummerSlam. So this weekend on August was a huge deal for us fans here in 2025, and it ended up being a huge turning point, I think, for a lot of people, and that includes myself. Now, for me personally, I was ready to take my fandom of the WWE to the next level. I have been following the WWE since I was a child, but I didn't really get super into it for a long time. It was probably a decade when I was pretty disengaged with the product as a whole. Just kind of moving on with different interests in my life because that's just sometimes stuff that happens in your childhood where you move on from different interests. But with the John Cena heel turn, with my friends getting back into it, I got back into WWE and I got really passionate about WWE and watching professional wrestling and really falling back in love with the product. And that is why I started this YouTube channel so that I could kind of yap about WWE and be kind of a non-binary Santi Zap ripoff. You know what I mean? And so this weekend is a big culmination of that for me, especially since it was happening in my home state of New Jersey. So, listen, I I wasn't gonna get those $200 SummerSlam tickets, but I did end up going to SmackDown in Newark before SummerSlam with my good friend, and that was an amazing experience. And I had actually recorded a whole vlog about it. I recorded a whole video, and I was gonna post it to this YouTube, being like, "Hey, I spent $100 to go to SmackDown and to watch WWE live and hear my thoughts on it and what the experience was like." I was really looking forward to making it, and I had my reactions ready as well for SummerSlam. I actually have them like unlisted in a YouTube playlist on my channel if you're for some reason curious about my reactions to the show. Um, but something happened at the end of the show that has caused a lot of headlines. And of course, if you're not familiar with the WWE, you might not be familiar with what I'm saying. But if you have any sort of interest in wrestling, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And that is, of course, the Beast incarnate, Brock Lesnar, making his surprise appearance and his return to the WWE after 2 years of a hiatus. And this should be a huge moment, right? This should be a massive thing for the WWE, right? This is one of the most iconic pro wrestlers of all time, has 20 plus years of being one of the greats, has some of the most iconic moments in the past. Um, and he returns to face a newly revitalized John Cena in his retirement tour, which, John Cena, Brock Lesnar is a legendary rivalry. So you would think this would be truly a crowning achievement of what I believe was actually a pretty solid SummerSlam. There are a lot of really good matches that I really enjoyed, especially night two with the TLC match, with the women's no DQ match, as well as the women's triple threat. So this should be sort of a crowning achievement, right? But obviously, things can never be that simple. And I'm here to talk about why I'm actually very deeply upset about this and why this um is really just sickening to me. And I'm doing this with no script whatsoever, so I'm kind of rambling for like a very long amount of time, but I'm gonna sort of break down to you guys the Brock Lesnar situation, why this is a controversial decision to bring him back, as well as what the implications there are for the future given this whole return. So, the first thing that needs to be made clear is that obviously Brock Lesnar was implicated in the Vince McMahon allegations of sex trafficking, which is, obviously one of the most horrible things you can do as a human being, especially with Vince McMahon having that much power. And when it comes to the Vince McMahon allegations, Triple H has made it very clear that he wants to steer away from that, right? That's what we've sort of understood because on TKO's blacklist was Brock Lesnar for a very long time. And we have kind of seen Triple H kind of sweep these allegations under the rug for the time being until there is, I guess, a formal legal conclusion around this. And so we see here um, that there are clearly sidestepping the allegations around Brock Lesnar as well as Vince McMahon, given that they recently, very conveniently, the night before the shocking reveal, stopped doing post show press conferences altogether. So, even at the very start of this, there are already some red flags if you just don't understand any of the context because of the lack of engagement with the press, the lack of communication as a company, as a human being from one person to the other in terms of what this implication has. And so, and by the way, I'm going to be showing you all the different sources on the screen, and you guys can check the description to see all of the different sources that I included to provide for this video. So, or I might just leave it in the comments if I'm not able to get that to work. But nevertheless, um, Vince McMahon allegations are totally separate and aside from what we do, and then we have Brock Lesnar making his return, someone who has been implicated in the case. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that soon. But I think the first thing we need to talk about here is obviously the documents and the texts between Vince McMahon and Janelle Grant. These are the people involved in this case, Janelle Grant obviously being the alleged victim. Again, I have to clarify for the legal reasons or whatever that this is all, I guess, alleged or whatever. But nevertheless, we understand that there are a lot of things that Vince McMahon has done in terms of sex trafficking. And one of the biggest things that he did end up doing was when he was in contract negotiations with Brock Lesnar, one of the things that he put into that contract was the promise of sexual relations with another employee of the WWE, obviously being Janelle Grant. And as we can see through these texts, we see Vince McMahon in showing his face, showing the picture evidence of him kind of signing off on this sort of behavior. And as we can also see with these messages in the document that we are going to get to with the next slide here, we can see some truly disgusting things being said about Vince McMahon, sort of the fantasizing of this woman that are just really gross to read, if I'm being completely honest. And we see in this text that Brock Lesnar was expecting this and was approving of this. Obviously, there is no confirmation of whether or not he, I guess, actively wanted this and actively signed off on this. We do know that this meetup, this sexual encounter that was arranged, was eventually canceled due to COVID and like other things like that. Although a lot of people sort of have theorized that that's probably because she just didn't want to be in this situation to begin with. Um, and so this kind of raises a lot of questions. Obviously, we know Vince and all of the things he's done to exploit women in the WWE. In terms of Brock Lesnar's involvement, I've heard a lot of people say that what he's doing is, technically legal. Um, which one, like, we're gonna get to the legal side of sexual abuse later. But when we really think about it, you just have to ask yourself the question of why would Brock Lesnar have this stipulation in his contract? Why would it even get brought up at all? And I think that's a real question to ask is like not every like main event wrestler is going to have this type of stipulation in their contract. Why specifically for Brock Lesnar did Vince McMahon want to put that in there? Is it because of Vince McMahon's own fantasies? Is it because he knows about Brock Lesnar's own fantasies? We can only make assumptions and make guesses. We will never truly know. But with that being said, this is extremely problematic stuff we are seeing here in these court files. And again, obviously, all of this is alleged, but nevertheless, we are seeing very troubling things from this case surrounding Brock Lesnar's character and his involvement and his closeness with Vince McMahon, which is a man that pretty much everyone in the wrestling community has already denounced. Anyone with like common sense has already denounced. So yeah, and I think what makes this really problematic and what makes me have, I guess, less benefit of the doubt for Brock Lesnar in this situation is the fact that there are many stories of him being abusive towards women and him exploiting women in a really disgusting manner. And so in 2020, ex WWE wrestler Terry Runnels, the wife of Dustin Rhodes, believe it or not, had made sort of the allegation that Brock Lesnar during earlier in his career had flashed, inappropriately revealed himself to Terry Runnels, and this was something that didn't I necessarily get legal action. It didn't seem like Terry Reynolds was interested in taking legal action, but it is something that she has spoken about multiple times in these interviews, and is obviously a very hefty thing to say about someone. And so we have multiple sources of people speaking out about abuse, which again, even if say Brock Lesnar is innocent of all of these things in whatever universe, it seems at bare minimum clear that he is putting himself in these compromising positions where he could potentially be exploiting other women. And that is under the bare minimum, like, hope, I guess, that he didn't do any of these vile things. I think best case scenario, like, you never want any person, any human being to go through these terrible things. So we hope that, he hasn't done these terrible things. But as we're seeing, he's at bare minimum putting himself in positions of trouble, which again kind of makes it really difficult for me to give him the benefit of the doubt in this situation. And we also see this in the Jim Cornette interviews that he's given out talking about Brock Lesnar as well. And this is again in Brock Lesnar's earlier stage in his career. The specific allegations with Janelle Grant, those were in 2021. This is taking place around the early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. And this is talking about a mixed tag match that was happening, I believe, or a mixed wrestling match where it's, one man, one woman, or, multiple men, multiple women uh, competing against each other in the independent scene. And what happens, obviously, is that, Jim Cornette talks about, even though he was specifically told not to beforehand, he seemingly intentionally inappropriately touches one of the wrestlers, Jim Cornette's wife, that he was wrestling against. And so we see, again, another pattern of these incidents going on. And this is a something that has been, really deeply spoken about by Jim Cornette. Again, I'm stuttering a little bit because this is all sort of unscripted, one take, but um, there's sort of a lot to talk about when it comes to this. And we're also seeing, even with something that Brock himself has confirmed, his behaviors surrounding women, even by his own accord, have potentially been very problematic. He talks about how, in his own autobiography, how he and his wife, current wife, had broken up at some point in 2004. Um, but because he really wanted to marry her, despite them being broken up, Brock Lesnar ends up breaking into her house with a screwdriver in order to try and propose to her, which obviously did not go over very well, but eventually led to them getting married pretty shortly thereafter in the coming days and weeks. Um, which is a lot to take in. Um, as you can see in this quote, Brock Lesnar, in his own words, talks about how like he got lucky because the guy that gave him the screwdriver to break into her house never at all had any suspicions that maybe something was going wrong. Because again, Brock Lesnar and his wife were not together anymore at the time. They had been split up, and this had also come down. Um, I believe also happened after Brock Lesnar attempted calling her multiple times in Florida, and it ended up, not getting picked up. And as a result, we get this incident that he very openly speaks about him breaking into his wife's home, or his, I guess, not even wife at the time, not even partner at the time's home. Um, and this is all extremely troubling, and it coincides, in my opinion, as well with the Triple H endorsement of Donald Trump, which obviously you can feel however you want to feel about Donald Trump as a president. But I think for a company that has gone record At least their representatives and like Cody Rhodes have gone on record saying that the WWE is supposedly a nonpartisan company. We are seeing this clear endorsement from the highest powers of WWE endorsing Donald Trump and endorsing the current Republican Party administration. And the reason why this bothers me, again, I think one thing is that obviously, like, if you're gonna be a political company, just say it. Like it's okay. You don't have to pose as a nonpartisan party, a nonpartisan company. But also this kind of, as we can keep track here, Donald Trump is also someone that has been in a lot of trouble with sexual assault and sexual harassment. He was found liable for sexual abuse and had to give up $5 million as a result of that in, I believe, civil court. And he's also received several allegations from about a dozen other women alleging some sort of sexual abuse from Donald Trump. And so to see that kind of endorsement coming from Triple H, the most powerful guy in the WWE, is very worrying. And I think very deeply coincides with them bringing back Brock Lesnar after all of these allegations of sexual abuse have come out, after all of these allegations of Vince McMahon has come out, as well as the denouncing of Vince McMahon, but bringing back Brock Lesnar for whatever reason. Um, and I think it's a very common talking point a lot of people are going to say is that, well, innocent until proven guilty, right? And that would make sense, right? Because, that's how the American legal system works. And, you want to always try and give people the benefit of the doubt as much as possible. And that's something that I completely understand. I completely agree with. Um, the reason why I hesitate on that when it comes to this case is one, that phrase is very often used in terms of sexual assault and sexual abuse cases to undermine potential victims, to try and invalidate the experiences of potential victims. People use innocent until proven guilty as a crutch to not take victims seriously, rather than for them to take the case seriously. You know what I mean? And as a result, what we see is that about 975 out of 1,000 perpetrators of sexual assault will walk away free. And this is a statistic you can find on Rain. Again, I will link this either in the pinned comment or it will be in the description. Um, and this kind of shows that it is very hard to legally prove of sexual abuse in a certain situation, in a legal situation. And it leads to a lot of people walking away free when they probably shouldn't have. And that's why, like, for every one false accusation that you may get, there are uncountable amounts of situations that go unreported, that go um unfollowed up with, that don't go followed up with at all. There are a lot of situations that don't go anywhere, even though they probably should, because of the culture, the sexual abuse culture that has developed in the world and has developed within our own culture, both in wrestling, in this country, and in this world in general. Um, and we can also see this get backed up by NBC News as well through other investigations showing how most violent sex crimes do not lead to convictions. And they also don't lead to arrest rates. Those allegations and those reports do not lead to arrests in a rate that is not comparable to that of regular violent crimes, like a regular like assault charge. Sexual abuse and violent sex crimes do not get that same kind of serious treatment for the victims that the victims of other types of crimes get, which I think is really a shame because you want to protect the safety of women, you want to protect the safety of human beings suffering through sexual abuse. And a lot of times it just does not happen, which obviously this is the type of thing that needs to be taken very seriously because obviously being falsely accused of something can really ruin your life, obviously. And so that's something that's always important to consider. But I, again, want to preach the idea that for every false accusation that you get, for every person that you get that has been wrongfully accused and that deserves justice of their own, there are millions of people around the world that deserve justice and are actually victims of SA and don't ever end up getting it. And so when we see this in the context of Brock Lesnar coming back, seeing all the problematic and abusive things he's done towards women over the past several years, at least the stories and allegations of such, to involve yourself with a person like that, I think is deeply troubling. And I think to involve yourself with someone like that is so deeply involved with Vince McMahon, is deeply troubling. And I think showcases that they really do not care that much about the situation. Because a lot of people are also saying, well, if TKO has illegally cleared him, the report is that 4 weeks ago, Brock Lesnar was illegally cleared by TKO. If TKO cleared them, then clearly they think he's fine. But as we're seeing here, legally clearing someone can mean very little in the sense of a moral compass. And there's a lot of different things, a lot of different ways I think about this. There are a couple posts from different people across the internet wrestling community that I kind of agree with. I think talking about these two tweets right here that I pulled up here kind of really resonate with how I feel about it. Thinking of using a woman as a negotiation tactic is crazy, is diabolical, and not in the kind of funny way that I sometimes say the word diabolical, but like in the genuinely like dictionary definition of the word diabolical. Um, Again, like who knows if any of that ended up, I guess, truly going through. But the fact that that was even a conversation to begin with Brock Lesnar, the fact that Vince McMahon even has that text to begin with of Brock Lesnar being in approval of that stipulation in the contract is very troublesome. And in my opinion, should signify him never coming back to the WWE, which is what we had all thought, which is something that everyone thought. Michael Cole said on commentary that we thought that he would never come back, but he never explained why did we think that he would never come back, and it's because he's allegedly a sex offender, you know. And Russell Oops also, which is a parody account, of course, so take it for your will, but it's still a human being behind the computer typing this opinion. And we talk about the WWE tributing Hulk Hogan, who has a very long legacy, but Hulk Hogan has also said some absolutely vile and disgusting things. And even as his time as a wrestler, before he said those vile, disgusting things, he was he was politicking his way to the top and doing things that were ultimately not good for wrestling. And he gets a tribute 4 times despite all of the racist and demeaning things he's done over the years. Obviously, we see Triple H really dismissing the Vince McMahon lawsuit, saying allegations are allegations, not really taking seriously the gravity of the situation with Vince McMahon. And then obviously they bring back Brock Lesnar, which I think at bare minimum is a terrible PR move. I think it's just bad for your PR at bare minimum. But I think at absolutely worst, it's like one of the most disgusting things the WWE could possibly do. Um, and as a result, a lot of WWE fans are very deeply disappointed in what transpired last night with Brock Lesnar returning to the WWE to challenge John Cena, presumably. Another thing I want to note is that also apparently it was John Cena's wish to have Brock Lesnar um, in his retirement tour, which I think says two things. One, Triple H can he can just say no to that request. He doesn't have to say yes. But also, two, it says a lot about John Cena if he really did want Brock Lesnar to be a part of this situation, especially since we know that John Cena has defended Vince McMahon in the past. Um, and then I guess sort of my final thoughts. I think, first of all, I think a lot of people are very reasonably upset. I think a lot of people are excited too, obviously, because Brock Lesnar, again, one of the most legendary wrestlers of all time. When you strip away the context of all of his off the ring, outside of the ring stuff, he is one of the most legendary wrestlers to ever step inside a ring. So a lot of people are very excited, and I think it makes sense from that perspective. But there's also a lot of people saying that people are trying to invalidate other people that are upset about this. A lot of people are trying to say, "Oh, the IWC is just crying. People are being soft and sensitive. That people are, this generation is always falsely accusing and stuff, and that it's all just a bunch of lies, and that people are again being like too soft." And I think that's truly asinine. I think you truly lack any sort of emotional intelligence if you say something like that. And I'll stand on that. I truly think people are trying to kill emotional intelligence in the world, and I think people want everyone to be emotionless, emotionless dumb fucks. I don't know, like, just emotionless, like, people that don't have an understanding of what other people may be going through, an understanding of things that are happening in the world. So if your reaction to someone being upset about Brock returning is to attack them, as being said by Corey Brennan here, then yeah, you do need to sort out your priorities. You do need to look at yourself in the mirror and say, why am I harassing someone who is upset over an alleged predator? You know what I mean? Like, that is something that I've seen a lot right now on YouTube comments, on Reddit, on Twitter, even on goddamn Blue Sky, Instagram, you name it. Like, a lot of hatred and vitriol being thrown against people who are siding with Janelle Grant and other potential victims of SA. The attacks that I'm seeing in this kind of smear campaign I'm seeing against them is really disheartening. And ultimately, kind of follow up on the Wrestle Oops tweet from the previous slide, Nicole Matthews says that when someone or company is telling you multiple fucking times who they are, it's on you if you continually don't believe them. And that's kind of where I want to end that slideshow, is by saying that, because at this point, this is what the WWE is. They are very willing to, I guess, put their hand in the controversy pot to stir up a reaction. And it's not towards building a great product. You can have great matches, you can have great PLEs, but the product itself is not great when their priority is towards generating these kinds of reactions. And so we are seeing, with the um, deepest dive into conservatism that the WWE has seen in a very long time, um, with the endorsement of Trump, with the dismissal of Vince McMahon's lawsuit, as well as the dismissal of Brock Lesnar's legal situation, the closing of press conferences, as well as the removal of diversity training essentially from their social media. Again, we have not seen any Pride Month tweets from them. We haven't seen any Black History Month tweets from them, which obviously, like, those kinds of posts don't mean much in the grander scheme of things, but it is very telling that they've been doing it for the past few years, and now that Donald Trump's in office, they're just somehow suddenly not doing it anymore. It's just an interesting thing to notice, and I think at this point, this is just how the WWE is. This is how TKO is. We know the UFC is historically very conservative, and we know that UFC and WWE are partnered together under the TKO umbrella. So this is kind of how TKO is, and a lot of people are going to be saying, "Well, if you don't like it, then leave." And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be making WWE videos anymore. I'm probably not going to be watching WWE anymore. At least not like, I'm not going to be buying Peacock. I unsubscribed from Peacock. I'm not going to be watching them on YouTube. Maybe if I'm interested in the match, I'll like I'll watch it through other means, if you know what I mean. But I think this kind of is a breaking point, and I feel like I, as a human being, cannot stand for this, and that doesn't make me morally superior to anyone else. You know what I mean? Ultimately, like, we're all just human beings. We're all just peas in this one giant pod that is, the Earth. You know what I mean? So I'm no better than anybody else for declaring my opposition to the WWE and what they're doing. I'm just to be honest, as a human being, just from person to person, I don't approve of this. and I want it to be known because I make WWE videos, and I feel like as someone dabbling with wrestling content creation, I have to put my foot on the ground and say I don't approve of this whatsoever. And so I'm not gonna be making WWE videos anymore. My videos are still gonna be up if you want to watch them, but yeah, I'm not gonna give you my SmackDown vlog. I'm not gonna give you my SummerSlam review. I mean, if you are curious, I mean, I did really enjoy the TLC match. If that means anything to you, um, yeah, I'm just really upset, and I'm not trying to be like a moral definer. I'm not trying to be your moral compass. Ultimately, you can make your own decision when it comes to WWE. If you want to continue supporting the company, fine, you can do your own thing. There's still are a lot of people that are going to be enjoying the WWE product, and that's completely okay because that's just a fact of life. Is that WWE is very popular. Um, I hope you at least understand that I, as a fan, as a human being, am very upset about this, and that I don't want to support this, and I don't want my own self to be reflected within the WWE and enjoying the WWE. So that's pretty much it. Um, Sorry that I couldn't make more videos. I really wanted to make more content about WWE, but I guess not anymore. Um, and I know it's like the third time I've said this, but I feel like I need to make it like super duper clear that I'm no better. I'm no better than anybody else. I'm not better than you just because I don't watch WWE. You know what I mean? I'm a human being, you're a human being, we're all human beings. We're all in this together trying to make the world a better place. And I am just a tiny little ant, little grain of sand in the giant world that we live in. Um, the reason why I'm talking about this is just because I feel passionate about it. I feel very upset about it, and because I feel like I should probably explain myself, given that I've made a couple WWE videos. So yeah, that was a lot of rambling. It's about half an hour of rambling. Um, I'm sorry, but yeah, goodbye.